I think God in the last 100 years has bombarded us with more and more evidence for His own existence, not just His existence, but His nature. Hey, welcome to Church for Skeptics. Dan Arsenal here. This is kind of the part two of maybe more than this, of course, about how God, and I'm convinced of this, and just give me a listen, okay? I think God in the last 100 years has bombarded us with more and more evidence for His own existence, not just His existence, but His nature. We talked last time about the Big Bang, and that's what we talked about that before too, of course. But this is a huge deal that for thousands of years, even Christians believe that the universe was eternal. I call it a steady state thing. And scientists love that. Even Albert Einstein loved that because for one big reason, if you have a beginning to the universe, it sounds like Genesis. Well, it does sound like Genesis, and Genesis is correct. There was a beginning for the universe. So now we know that. Science knows that. Everybody would call it the Big Bang model now. My point is the resistance to it. Why resist all that evidence once it started pouring in? The redshift, the expansion of the universe, the mathematics of Einstein that was confirmed by several other mathematicians and physicists. Why resist that? Well, maybe it's human nature. We resist change, including scientists, by the way, but that's what science is all about and should be, is that they're willing to change their minds. Why did they have a hard time to it? And there's really, they will tell you the one resistance was it sounds theological, and it is theological because you can't get something from nothing. And yet nothing was there before the universe except God. I've covered that before, so I don't want to cover it today. I want to cover something else about that. I'm going to read you a little bit. I read Romans 1 last time, and the invisible attributes of God, according to Romans 1, are number one is eternal power. There you go, creation ex nihilo, from nothing, and His divine nature, which is the whole moral argument. If there is no God, there's no such thing as morality. Now, I'm going to read you from Psalm 136. I've kind of latched onto this psalm here recently because it talks about the steadfast love of God. A lot of critics want to say you got an Old Testament God who's hateful and judgmental and all that, and then the New Testament, nice Jesus. It's the same person. I'll give you a couple of verses just to get the context of this. Then I'm going to give you verse 5, which is the whole point of this message. Psalm 136:1, ESV, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. And here's that says over and over again, for His steadfast love endures forever. I'm thinking of a song. I want to say it is from James Taylor. Everyone knows that love's the finest thing around. Would you agree with that? What the world needs now is love, sweet love. 1 John 4:8 says God is love. Here it says that in the Old Testament, by the way. It's interesting. The people who believed in God, the Jewish nation in the Old Testament, they knew God could be great judgmental and pour out His wrath, but they thought God was a loving God. And so here it says, the psalmist here says, His steadfast love endures forever. Verse 2, give thanks to the God of gods, for His steadfast love endures forever. Now let's go to verse 5. And it talks about, again, it's giving thanks. Give thanks to Him who does great wonders, for His steadfast love endures forever. To Him, give thanks to Him who by understanding made the heavens. His steadfast love endures forever. God created the universe out of love. When we look, just observe, which God gives us the ability to do, the universe and our planet and our life. One of the arguments of Bertrand Russell that we talked about last week against intelligent design, which is what we're focused on here, was that if this is intelligent design, it's a very bad job. You have to understand that from, again, the explanation is from Scripture. This is not exactly the world, the universe that God made. This is a fallen universe as a result of sin. Think of the second law of thermodynamics, which is that everything has entropy. Energy decreases. Matter can't be destroyed or created, according to the first one, except for God. Second law of thermodynamics is that everything is entropy. Everything is decreasing, and there's really no science. It's just a given brute fact in science, but there's no explanation for that. The Bible has an explanation for that. It's called sin. We're separated in some degree with God, but He hasn't abandoned us. We still have this world, and it still is terrible in some places, but really beautiful as well. It really is, as Louis Armstrong said, it's a beautiful world. My point here is this. We're going to start talking about the evidences scientifically that show that this is a universe created by the Word of God, by the understanding, which means the omniscience and omnipotence to carry out that knowledge of God. And it's just evident. And God has been pouring it on for the last 50 years. And I've said last time, I think in response to the fact that so much of science has steered us away from God. Not the facts, you understand, but the interpretation of those facts. So science has discovered, we said last week, that Carl Sagan thought there were only really two parameters necessary for life, the right sun, the right distance. It's so many more now. This is in the last, 1960s, 75 years, 60 years, 60 years, 60 plus. It is so much more now. I want to say it's like Amazon. It's a truckload more. We're in the hundreds now of parameters that science has told us and explained to us and discovered. You get Nobel Prizes for stuff like this. Not just the right size, that's true, the right size sun and the right distance. That's for sure. More and more and more. We're going to talk about one or two today. How about the size of the earth? Does that matter? When I was a kid growing up, one of my favorite television shows was My Favorite Martian. If you watch that, raise your hand. It was just a cool show about a Martian, of course. And so everybody, think about this. When I was growing up, you had Star Trek. Everybody just assumed that there were planets out there that had life similar to us. Maybe they had weird, from our perspective, weird looking life. It goes on and on and on. Star Wars picked up on that same thing. And so we can believe that there are planets all across the universe here, but not scientifically. We just cannot see that. We can't believe that. There's no evidence for that. So what about the earth then? What makes the earth special? Well, its size, for one thing. If the earth, and think about it, we got the earth in our Milky Way galaxy system, and then you've got the galaxy system, and there are, of course, millions, trillions of galaxies out there in the universe. Every planet has which is kind of strange. You could Google, a lot of this stuff I just Googled. Every planet, every mass has a magnetic field. And that's what, of course, balances everything. That's what keeps us, we're sort of pushed towards each other. And then you also have the cosmological constant, which keeps the universe expanding. The ratio between those two has to be so perfect that we couldn't live here otherwise. We couldn't exist otherwise unless they were just perfectly balanced. And of course that comes, if you want to call it from the Big Bang. I call it from creation. God said bang, there it was. But this planet, this magnetic field is called the magnetosphere. And so our Earth, because of its perfect size, has just enough magnetism, let's say, to repel something that would destroy and has destroyed life, if it ever existed, I don't think it did, on the planet Mars. Why is it that there are no favorite Martians? Why is it that Mars is just lifeless and Earth, which is just a little bit bigger than Mars, has life teeming in it? And the answer is the size of the earth. One of the answers is the size of the earth. If the earth were just infinitesimally smaller, we wouldn't have enough gravity to deflect. Our magnetosphere would be smaller. And so our ability to repel what we call the solar winds would not exist. Solar winds are particles bombarding us constantly from the sun. The whole idea is that the solar wind of the sun bombards all the planets, including Mars. And in Mars, it wipes out virtually everything. There's no air, there's no oxygen, there's no water, there's no hydrogen. And so you can't live on the planet Mars. But Earth is just right big enough so that we deflect the solar wind and we can live here. That means the Earth could not be any smaller. Well, what about if it was bigger? I mean, just a little bit bigger. I mean, barely a little bit bigger. Well, the solar wind problem would go away. You think about the big planets like Jupiter and Saturn. And by the way, that's just another thing that has to be there, by the way. Jupiter and Saturn aren't just superfluous big old planets. They have to be there. And the reason if they weren't there, that we could not exist, because it is Jupiter and Saturn, because of their huge electromagnetic, their magnetosphere, they deflect not only the solar wind, but also they deflect meteorites and meteors that are bombarding us. And every once in a while we have one squeak boot through and have a meteor crash here. And when they do that, it's devastating, of course, and we can historically know that. Saturn and Jupiter have there, and they deflect us. So we're protected in large part from meteors because of Saturn and Jupiter and the bigger planets there. It's just another thing. Well, what if the Earth were just a little bit bigger then? Well, if the Earth were just a little bit bigger, then we would have a little more gravity, right? Our magnetism would be stronger. Mass, density, gravity all goes together. There's a formula for that. Why should there be a mathematical formula for gravity? But there is. And if ours was a little bit bigger, then our gravity would be greater, and that means that the poisonous gases couldn't leave the atmosphere. So you would have methane gas here, you would have carbon dioxide so much that you could not breathe, we could not live, and it goes on and on. You wouldn't get oxygen, you wouldn't get hydrogen, you wouldn't get water, and so forth. A couple of biophysicists have said that Earth is about as big as any planet can get and still have life. So we're not too small, we're not too big. There is a term for that. It's called the Goldilocks effect. And so think about just people who don't believe in God and they don't believe in intelligent design still use words like fine tuning. There are, and we're going to keep going with this in the next videos, there are hundreds of parameters that have to be just right. Now I'm going to give you the Mac Daddy of them all. And here's the point, every one of those parameters, size of the Earth, distance, all those things, and there are hundreds of those things that just have to be just right. The condition of water, the nature of water, we'll talk about next time. Every one of those could not exist without being so finely tuned that the probability of their fine-tuning is so astronomical, it's not like it's beyond chance. If you can believe that everything happens here by chance, you have blind faith. You are not basing your beliefs on the facts, because the facts are the probability of those things happening, even individually, is astronomical. But when you put them together, it is, there's only 10 times 80, they tell us, atoms in the entire universe. And we're talking about chances here that are way beyond that. I'll give you the one. Steven Weinberg, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, who was born in 1933 and died recently in 2021, 5 years ago. Brilliant guy and an atheist, staunch atheist. He had a special disregard for religion in particular. And he was reluctant, he said, to accept the whole idea of the universe having a beginning for the very reason it's too much like Genesis, exactly what he said. Here's what I'm going to give you a quote from that guy. Life as we know it would be impossible if any one of several physical quantities has even slightly different values. The strength of gravity. The most finely tuned parameter is the cosmological constant. Now here's what the cosmological constant means. It means basically the rate of expansion. Well, what causes the universe to expand? And as far as we know, what causes that is what we call dark energy. Did you know that they say now that the universe is comprised of, and dark energy, we don't know, we can't get our hands on it. It doesn't come from anything, so to speak. That sounds familiar. But dark matter and dark energy comprise 95% of the universe. Wow, that's probably above our pay grade here. If the rate of expansion, especially compared to the rate of gravity pulls us together just right, but the cosmological constant pulls us apart just right, so that there's a balance between the two. And this ratio is 1 according to Steven Weinberg, atheist. Steven Weinberg said that it could not be any different by 1 times 10 to the 120th exponent. 1 times 10 to the 120th power? We can't comprehend. You can't comprehend that. I can't comprehend that. Let me just suggest this. Put a 1 times 10 and put 120 zeros after it, and see what you get. Think about this. A million, one in a million, is 6 zeros, 6 zeros after it. So it's 1 in a million is 1 times 10 to 6 zeros. 1 in a trillion doubles that. It's 1 times, now can you imagine a trillion anything? 1 times 10 for 12 zeros after it. So we got 6, 12. A quadrillion is 10 with 15 zeros after it. A quintillion, 18 zeros after it. Now think about this. The number of atoms in the universe is 1 times 10 to the 80th. And yet, the cosmological constant, being just like it is 1 times 10 to the 120th power. 120 zeros after it. That's not random. It's beyond random. It's beyond chance. At what point can we say this just can't happen by chance? You can't go to Las Vegas with those odds. You couldn't go to Las Vegas and win 1 of a million. What's the chances of winning the lottery? One in what? A few million. But you're talking about 120 zeros after 10. That's beyond our imagination, really. It's beyond my comprehension for sure. So when you put this together, Bertrand Russell has said there's not enough evidence for the existence of God. Can we not say that there's so much evidence for intelligent design that's called the anthropic principle, the fine-tuning of the universe? If it's finely tuned, intelligence is behind it. Finely tuned. If it's anthropic and a principle, the principle has intelligence behind it. The universe and our existence has God behind it. That means there's a purpose for your life, my life. Let's find out what it is. Thanks for watching.